You play as a lowly footsoldier on a suicidal quest to avenge his master. Your weapons are rusty and half broken. Horrific monsters inhabit nearly every corner of the world, and even the non-hostile characters are about as helpful as a punch to the gut. And yet, despite how awful everything is, actually playing Labyrinth the Demon King is a lot of fun. Greetings and welcome, friends. I'm Ash, and I've spent the past couple of days in a living nightmare thanks to Labyrinth the Demon King's rather chunky demo. But before we move on, I just want to say that Labyrinth the Demon King is so retro that it exclusively runs in a 4:3 aspect ratio. In order to spare those of you on smaller screens, I'll be stretching that out to a more comfortable HD resolution. Now usually this will be a big no-no given how much it would ruin the image, but considering how grainy and blurry Labyrinth the Demon King is all on its own, it's thankfully almost unnoticeable. What I noticed very quickly, however, is that unlike a lot of RPGs released these days, Labyrinth the Demon King is miraculously not a Souls-like. It has similar sensibilities in the sense that every single enemy is a serious threat, and that success depends heavily on your timing. But the actual moment-to-moment gameplay is much slower and much more methodical. After all, Labyrinth the Demon King is a survival horror game. You cannot just waltz into the realm of torment and roll around on the ground expecting to win. And believe me, I have tried. A lot of this comes down to your stamina regenerating extremely slowly while in combat, which means that you cannot just swing wildly at an enemy and hope for the best. If they block too many of your attacks, or simply have more health than you expected, you can end up crippling yourself without really achieving much. I did this for my first couple of battles, and the result was a massive waste of health followed by a, well, kind of embarrassing death really. The key thing I had to learn was that Labyrinth the Demon King wants you to be patient. Observe what the enemy is doing, counter their attacks, and then strike back when they're exposed. This sort of thing is simple in theory, but in practice, well, not so much. Basic attacks can be parried by raising your block right as the enemy swings at you. This will let you damage them without expending much stamina. On the other hand, heavy attacks and kicks will go straight through your blocks, so you have to dodge those. The problem here is that if you parry a heavy attack, you're going to get smacked over the head. And if you try to dodge way too much, you're going to run out of stamina and again get smacked over the head. To my knowledge, there is no way to brute force the system. You have to use appropriate counters at the appropriate time. It is a tricky combat system to learn because of this, especially since all of your moves are incredibly slow, but I found it to be quite effective at conveying the idea that you are way over your head. Once again, Labyrinth the Demon King is a survival horror game, so struggling your way through it, all battered and bruised, makes for a much better and much more immersive story than if you simply walked in, kicked everyone's ass, and then walked out. The only thing about the combat that I didn't like is that sometimes small enemies can attack you so quickly you end up getting stunned every time you try to swing back. The centipedes were particularly annoying for me, as I swear, every time I would try to attack them, my sword would just miss despite striking them directly in the face. They ended up wrecking me so often, I would freak out more upon seeing a couple of bugs than a giant, near-invincible demon with my name at the very top of its naughty list. This is a good time to bring up the atmosphere, because to me, this is Labyrinth the Demon King's most crowning achievement. Even during the peaceful introduction in the forest where there are no enemies or threats of any kind, I found myself constantly paranoid and uneasy. Labyrinth the Demon King's world has this omnipresent aura of depression and hopelessness that saps away the beauty from even the most tranquil of places. Because of this, everyone and everything just look like they've gone through hell and come back with maybe a couple of pieces missing. Nowhere is this more apparent than when you reach one of the demon-infested towers. While there are still actual people living and working inside of them, everything there is ruined, neglected, and decaying. I could definitely see just how grand the place must have been back in its heyday, but sadly, nothing of that splendor remains today. Instead, it's just piles upon piles of dirt and grime, battered furniture, and enemies that look like the only thing keeping them alive is sheer spite. Even some of the more powerful enemies look terrible, and I'm not talking about the visuals. The only ones that seem like they're actually enjoying their existence are the weird cat demons you meet along the way, all of which would love to devour you, but instead they choose to leave you alone because they think you'll create more juicy corpses for them to feast on later down the line. So yeah, Labyrinth of the Demon King's world is all sorts of messed up. While the PlayStation 1 era visuals with their blurriness and graininess certainly contributed to me feeling dour and melancholic, I would say the biggest culprit was the music. It ranges from moody background tracks that build a sense of creeping danger to what I can only describe as a musical version of someone breathing down your neck. I found it to be highly unsettling and oftentimes downright oppressive. It constantly made me paranoid that someone was going to jump me from behind, even when I knew for a fact that there was nobody there. So while it's not exactly something I'll listen to in my free time, Labyrinth of the Demon King's soundscape did a great job of drawing me into its world, and really made me feel like I am an insignificant insect facing off against impossible odds. As for the actual areas you'll be exploring on your quest for vengeance, I would describe those as a hybrid between old-school dungeon crawlers and survival horror games. Or in other words, expect loads of tight and interconnected corridors leading you to highly thematic rooms, housing nasty surprises, minor puzzles, or juicy bits of lore. Or, if you're particularly lucky, maybe even all three. I've only had access to the first dungeon, but even in that one, progression was anything but straightforward. As you would expect from a decaying tower, I frequently ran into dead ends while exploring, either because the area was locked off, or simply because the passage was completely ruined and thus impenetrable. As such, I had to constantly crisscross this multi-story dungeon looking for alternate routes and key items to help me progress. Combine this with relatively simple puzzles that mostly involved rubbing one strange-looking object on another, and I think you can see just why I got such a heavy Silent Hill or Resident Evil vibe from this whole experience. Those vibes only got stronger once I was duped into desecrating a shrine, and in the process summoning a nigh unstoppable monster that spent the entire rest of the demo hunting me down. And much like Mr. X from Resident Evil 2, I found the droopy-eyed demon to be both a terrifying opponent as well as a unique friend. You see, he pretty much hates everyone, so if you drag him into a bunch of enemies, he'll do you a favor and clear all of them out without breaking a single sweat. The only teensy-weensy problem here is that you cannot kill him either. No amount of fancy swordplay or magic applied directly to his face will do anything but momentarily slow him. Once he's loose, he's going to hunt you come hell or high water. Needless to say, this made the already tense atmosphere feel all the more oppressive, because for whatever reason he would always show up at the least opportune times. This is also where the level design really came to shine, because suddenly all of those side paths and interconnected hallways became more than just set dressing. They became ways to avoid my persistent pursuer and give myself a bit of a time to just breathe. Going through these detours also helped me discover a bunch of secrets that I either just kind of missed on my first run through, or completely forgot about because some gremlin-looking thing distracted me by lunging at my kneecaps. As for what you can get out of these secrets, well, it's mostly consumable items to help you in combat, money that you can use to purchase new weapons and items to play around with, and, perhaps most interestingly of all, fragments of a powerful weapon that you'll need to first reassemble and then reforge in order to make it into something that is perhaps a little bit more than a fancy paperweight. Still, I do like these multi-stage item hunts. While exploring this convoluted mess of hallways and ruined rooms, I originally relied heavily on my map to keep myself straight. However, thanks to Mr. Droopy chasing me around, and the secrets constantly beckoning me to sniff them out, I eventually became surprisingly familiar with the whole place. So much so that I'm actually fairly certain I could draw it from memory. And so, in a shocking twist I never could have expected, the level design in a game with Labyrinth in its name ended up being actually quite memorable. And honestly, this applies to Labyrinth of the Demon King in general. I was mostly prepared for a Souls-like romp through a couple of spooky caves, but instead I got a very old-school dungeon crawler with some stellar atmosphere and a genuinely fascinating world. That said, I am well aware that Labyrinth of the Demon King is an extremely niche game and that it is not going to appeal to most people. However, if you're one of the chosen few like me that just kind of enjoys reveling in misery, then definitely give the free demo a try, as Labyrinth of the Demon King is a thoroughly unique and thoroughly creative game. And in today's gaming industry, such things really should be celebrated. And perhaps most importantly, I had a lot of fun with it, so hopefully you will as well. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, pet your favorite Demon King, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you for sticking to the very end, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye!